In January 1915, World War I was only 5 months old, but had already caused terrible destruction. Around 1 million soldiers had been killed or wounded. The war started in the Balkans, but it quickly spread to many parts of the world. Two main groups were fighting each other. The Central Powers included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. The Allied powers included Britain, France, Russia, Serbia, Montenegro, Belgium, and Japan. In Eastern Europe, especially in Poland and the Baltic region, the Russian army suffered many serious defeats. German and Austria-Hungary forces won several battles, but the Russian army did not give up and continued fighting. Austria-Hungary also faced big problems. Its army failed to defeat Serbia and suffered heavy losses, which was very embarrassing for the empire. In the Caucasus Mountains, Russian and Ottoman soldiers fought in extremely cold winter conditions. Many soldiers suffered not only from fighting, but also from freezing temperatures, hunger, and sickness. On the Western Front, the war reached a deadly stalemate. French, British, and Belgian soldiers dug deep trenches to protect themselves. German troops did the same on the opposite side. These trenches stretched from the English Channel all the way to Switzerland. Life in the trenches was very hard, with mud, rats, disease, and constant danger. The war also spread to the air and the sea. Germany began the world's first strategic bombing campaign by sending huge airships called Zeppelins to bomb Britain. These airships attacked the ports of King's Lynn and Great Yarmouth. Houses were damaged and 4 civilians were killed, shocking the British people. At sea, the Battle of Dogger Bank took place. The British Navy managed to sink 1 German cruiser, but the rest of the German fleet escaped. Because Britain controlled the seas, it set up a naval blockade around Germany. This blockade stopped important supplies, including food, from reaching the German people. In response, Germany started its own blockade. It declared the waters around the British Isles a war zone and warned that its submarines, known as U-boats, would attack Allied merchant ships. By early 1915, it was clear that the war was becoming larger, deadlier, and more dangerous than anyone had expected. German submarines, known as U-boats, began attacking ships without warning. Britain depended heavily on imported food to feed its people. Germany hoped that by sinking supply ships, it could starve Britain into surrender. On the Eastern Front, German Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg launched a powerful winter attack against the Russian army. This offensive led to another major Russian defeat at the Second Battle of the Masurian Lakes. The fighting took place in freezing winter conditions. The Russians lost up to 200,000 soldiers, and about half of them were captured after being surrounded by German forces. Many soldiers suffered terribly from the cold, hunger, and exhaustion. However, the Russians had more success against Austria-Hungary. After a long siege lasting 4 months, the fortress city of Przemysl finally fell to Russian forces. This victory gave the Russians around 100,000 Austrian prisoners. By this time, Austria-Hungary's total losses in the war had reached about 2 million soldiers, showing how badly the empire was struggling. Meanwhile, the British and French planned an attack in the Dardanelles Strait. Their goal was to threaten Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Allied leaders believed that a strong naval attack would force the Ottoman Empire to surrender quickly. Allied warships began bombarding Turkish shore forts along the narrow straits. At first, the attack seemed successful, but the situation soon turned disastrous. Hidden sea mines sank 3 Allied battleships and damaged 3 more. Because of these heavy losses, the naval attack was called off. On the Western Front, the British launched an attack at Neuve Chapelle. At first, there was some progress, but the advance quickly stopped. German barbed wire, strong defenses, and machine gun fire caused heavy casualties. British and Indian troops suffered around 11,000 casualties. which was nearly 1/4 of the attacking force. 6 weeks later, during the Second Battle of Ypres, the Germans used poison gas for the first time on the Western Front. They released a deadly cloud of chlorine gas that drifted into Allied trenches. Many soldiers were forced to flee in panic, coughing and choking. Although the gas attack created a gap in the Allied lines, the Germans were not prepared to take full advantage of it. They did not have enough reserve troops ready to move forward. As a result, the opportunity was lost. By this stage of the war, soldiers on both sides were experiencing unimaginable suffering. New and terrifying weapons, harsh weather, and constant fighting made World War I more brutal and deadly with each passing month. After poison gas was used on a battlefield, soldiers were quickly given very basic and crude gas masks to protect themselves. This marked the beginning of a dangerous chemical weapons arms race, as both sides started developing and using deadly gas weapons. The Allies then decided to send ground troops to Gallipoli, a narrow peninsula near the Dardanelles. Soldiers from the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, known as the Anzacs, took part in the landings. Their mission was to capture the Turkish shore forts that were blocking Allied warships from reaching Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. However, the plan did not go as expected. As soon as the troops landed, they faced fierce resistance from well-prepared Turkish forces. The Allied soldiers were pinned down close to the beaches and were unable to move forward. Fighting became extremely difficult, and conditions were harsh with heat, disease, and shortages of food and water. One day before the Gallipoli landings, a tragic and dark chapter began inside the Ottoman Empire. The government started the systematic deportation and killing of ethnic Armenians living within its borders. Armenians were a long-persecuted ethnic and religious minority and were accused of supporting the empire's enemies. Men, women, and children were forced from their homes and sent on long marches to the Syrian desert. Many were left without food, water, or shelter and died from hunger, thirst, and violence. In total, more than 1 million Armenians lost their lives. The Allied governments condemned these actions as a crime against humanity and civilization and promised to punish those responsible. To this day, the Turkish government disputes both the number of deaths and whether these events should be called genocide. On the Eastern Front, German and Austria-Hungary forces launched a joint offensive in Galicia. They broke through Russian defenses, recaptured the city of Przemysl, and captured about 100,000 Russian soldiers. This marked the beginning of a steady advance against the Russian army, which was growing weaker. At sea, the war took a shocking turn. The British passenger ship Lusitania, sailing from New York to Liverpool, was attacked by a German U-boat off the coast of Ireland. The submarine fired a torpedo without warning. The ship sank quickly, and 1,198 passengers and crew members were killed, including 128 Americans. The sinking of the Lusitania caused outrage around the world. In the United States, President Woodrow Wilson strongly protested Germany's actions. Although the U.S. did not enter the war immediately, this event greatly increased tensions and pushed America closer to joining the conflict. By this point in 1915, World War I had become even more brutal, spreading across land, sea, and air, and affecting soldiers and civilians alike in devastating ways. The American public was deeply shocked and angry after the sinking of the Lusitania. However, Germany defended its action. German leaders claimed that the ship was a legitimate military target because Britain was using it to secretly carry weapons and other military supplies. In May 1915, the Allies launched the Second Battle of Artois. This was another attempt to break through the strong German defensive lines on the Western Front. The French army led the main attack at Vimy Ridge, while British forces carried out supporting attacks at Aubers Ridge and Festubert. Despite heavy fighting, the results were disappointing. The Allies suffered around 130,000 casualties, but they advanced only a few thousand yards. Once again, powerful German defenses, including trenches, machine guns, and artillery, stopped the Allied offensive. During the summer of 1915, a new threat appeared in the skies above the Western Front. Germany introduced a new fighter aircraft called the Fokker Eindecker. This plane was one of the first to have a machine gun that could fire forward through the spinning propeller. This was made possible by a new invention called interrupter gear. Because of this technology, German pilots gained control of the air. Allied aircraft losses increased rapidly during this period, which became known as the Fokker Scourge. For the first time, air power began to play a major role in the war. Italy, influenced by British and French promises of territorial gains at the expense of Austria-Hungary, decided to join the Allies. Italy declared war on Austria-Hungary and later also declared war on the Ottoman Empire and Germany. The Italian army launched its first attacks against Austrian positions along the Isonzo River. However, the terrain was mountainous and heavily defended. The Italian attacks failed, and the army suffered heavy casualties with little success. Meanwhile, the Allies faced a serious crisis on the Eastern Front. The Russian army began a large-scale retreat, abandoning much of Poland. German forces advanced and entered Warsaw on August 5, 1915. In response to these setbacks, Tsar Nicholas II made a critical decision. He dismissed the Russian army's commander-in-chief, Grand Duke Nicholas, and took personal control of the military. This decision would later prove disastrous, as it tied the Tsar directly to Russia's military failures and weakened his position at home. By late 1915, World War I was clearly not ending soon. The fighting continued to spread, new weapons were changing warfare, and political decisions were making the conflict even more complex and dangerous. After earlier defeats at Gallipoli, the Allies sent more troops and landed reinforcements at Suvla Bay. At the same time, the Anzac forces launched several new attacks. However, none of these efforts were able to break the deadlock. The fighting remained stuck. Conditions at Gallipoli were terrible for both sides. Soldiers suffered not only from enemy fire, but also from extreme heat, swarms of flies, lack of clean water, and serious diseases. Life on the peninsula was miserable and deadly. In the Atlantic Ocean, German submarines continued to attack ships. A U-boat sank the passenger liner SS Arabic, killing 44 people, including 3 Americans. After strong warning from the United States, Germany agreed to stop attacking passenger ships in order to avoid pushing America into the war. On the Western Front, the Allies launched their largest offensive of the war so far. Their goal was to break through German defenses and also to reduce pressure on their struggling Russian ally in the east. The French attacked during the Third Battle of Artois and the Second Battle of Champagne. The British, using poison gas for the first time in large numbers, attacked at Loos. At first, the Allies made some progress, but the attacks soon slowed down. Strong German defenses and poor communication caused the offensives to fail. Casualties were enormous on all sides, with very little land gained. Meanwhile, the Allies opened a new front in the Balkans by landing troops at Salonika in Greece. They hoped to help Serbia and attack the Central Powers from the south. However, they arrived too late. Bulgaria joined the Central Powers, and together they launched a powerful attack that defeated Serbia in just 2 months. The remaining Serbian army was forced to retreat through the harsh mountains of Albania during winter. Thousands of soldiers died from cold, hunger, and exhaustion. By the end of the war, 1/3 of Serbia's army had been killed, the highest loss rate of any country in the war. Fierce fighting also continued on the Italian front. Italian forces launched the third and fourth battles of the Isonzo River. Although the Italians had more soldiers, Austria-Hungary held strong defensive positions on high ground. These positions were almost impossible to capture, and the fighting ended with heavy Italian losses and little success. In the Middle East, British forces tried to advance toward Baghdad, but they were stopped by Ottoman troops at the Battle of Ctesiphon, about 25 miles south of the city. The British army was forced to retreat to the town of Kut, where it became surrounded and besieged by Turkish forces. Finally, the Allies made the difficult decision to abandon the Gallipoli Campaign. In a carefully planned operation, 83,000 troops were secretly evacuated without alerting Turkish forces. Remarkably, not a single soldier was lost during the evacuation. It is considered one of the best planned operations of the entire war. However, the campaign had already cost around 250,000 casualties on each side. Overall, 1915 was a very bad year for the Allies. They suffered huge losses but gained very little territory. Despite this, there was no serious talk of peace. Instead, all sides prepared for even larger and more deadly battles in 1916. New tactics were developed based on the failures of the past year, and each side still believed that a decisive victory on the battlefield was possible